to your podcast.
But okay. So, good afternoon, Tiffany. How are you?
Hi, Gwen. I'm excited. How are you?
I'm excited too. A little anxious about things that are going on in the world, but I'm excited for our conversation.
Me
We
too.
Tiffany Lee is a friend of mine, and we have been communicating recently and have learned about our common interest in the world of spirituality. And we have been sharing um, our knowledge that we've obtained over the course of time around spirituality. And there are uh, some interesting insights that Tiffany has shared with me that I thought would be good for the world to know. And she had suggested maybe we should record this, maybe we should have this. And so here we are having a conversation about this, because we thought it would be something that other folks in the world could benefit from,
Right.
especially given the world events of recent months, let's just say that, maybe even recent years, but certainly in the last few months. Um, I came into the world of spirituality, I guess, in the '90s, and this is me coming from a background of I guess I was raised in a religion, and it was Presbyterian,
Mm.
and for a while I was really, I guess it was late 20s into my 30s. I was, still very much attached to that religion and Presbyterianism. And I'm not going to get into an explanation of what that is, but it was, just organized religion.
Right.
I would go to church every Sunday, even though I did, I felt like it wasn't really penetrating, like the lessons that I was hearing wasn't really resonating with me. It wasn't really penetrating, but I would go anyway. And here's a little um, tidbit about how I was and how I was operating. I would party all night into the morning, Saturday night, come home, change clothes, and go to church. I,
Very common scenario.
that's what I did. But it really didn't really hit me. And then when I moved, this is from upstate New York and Rochester, New York. Then I moved to California, and I was looking around. I thought I knew I needed something else in my life, and I was looking around for a church to land, a place to land, in terms of I didn't call it spirituality, I called it a religion, I guess.
Right.
And I looked at different places and attended different places, and it just didn't hit me. And then a friend introduced me, she was a book club associate, to this place, and they called it religious science. And even though, I mean, don't let those terms turn you off, those of you who are listening to this. But what really landed with me was it seemed to, what they were, the message that was being given was a, answering the question for me about why I'm here. What is it, what are we about? Why are we here? And so I stayed with that for a while, and I'm still kind of evolving through it. And and as I get older, it's somehow, I don't know, I'm somehow connecting with it in a even a deeper way. But I want to go even deeper than that, because I still, I mean, so there's a lot more to learn. But in the conversations that I'm having with Tiffany, she's kind of opening up some information for me that I want to, that we want to share with the world. And you had said to me that you have a really close connection now with a higher spirit. And because of what the religion that I come from, I I tend to stay away from words like God, and because it has a connotation for me of this being or this something, this man, actually, this man up in the sky, very judgmental,
Hmm.
and that will, if
Send
you,
you to hell if you
yeah,
sin. Yeah.
exactly. If you behave
Yeah.
in a certain way, it's going to punish you, you know.
Hmm.
And if you don't behave in a, and if you, do things that are good in God's eyes, then you'll be rewarded. And
Right.
I've come to believe that that's not the case. And so, and that, yeah. So, and Tiffany was saying things to me like, oh, I have this connection, and I'm able to, it, the words, and I'm going to let Tiffany talk in a minute, download information from this higher spirit. And I said, what? How do you do that? So that's what we're here to talk about and share. And maybe some of what you hear will resonate with you. Um, so I want to know, how is it? What is your routine? What is your routine, your daily routine, and when is it that you're able to download this information from the higher power? And in answering, maybe you want to talk a little bit about your religious or spiritual background, and what made you come to where you are now. But
Right.
now,
Yeah. No, and thank you for sharing yours because we didn't talk about that. So, yeah. So for me, I was raised in a family. It's funny, as a child, my dad was like the matriarch of the family, and my mom has three sisters, so there's four girls, and they all had different religions. And one was what we would call, I think my grandmother was what we would call a witch. And my aunt Pat, my favorite aunt, was like a witch. But keep in mind, I'm like super young. I didn't know anything. And then my aunt Sherry was Buddhist. And my mom was just like, my mom just kind of went with my dad, who was Catholic. And so I was raised Catholic. And then
mm,
my grandfather lived with us, and he was Buddhist too. So growing up at a very young age, I had all these influences. And then we had my mother, who's a professor, had a room, because I think this was done in the old days, because we didn't have the internet, where there was a room that was a library. So we had a room with like wall to wall books. My mom was a big avid reader. And so I started reading young too. There was everything in that library. So it was my favorite place to be because I was a super introvert, and I would literally sit there and just pull a book down. And sometimes it was on palm reading, and sometimes it was the Bible, and sometimes it was whatever. And my Aunt Pat would, she was my favorite aunt. She was beautiful. She's the one that recently passed,
yeah.
was highly into spirituality, and she was the one that was teaching me like palm reading and stuff like that. And we're talking like at 5. And she was one of those Black Panther, and she just adored me. And I loved my Aunt Sherry too, who was Buddhist, and she used to take me to the temple and she taught me the chant. And my grandfather lived with us, and he had a Buddhist little temple there and taught me the chant. And then also I went to church with my parents. And I mean,
Mhm.
compared to those two things, honestly, going to Catholic church is not fun. I remember I would just like, have to kneel. I would just stay down there and do whatever. I brought Barbies and stuff with me to church. And then and so my aunt at some point always had to live with us. And then, like I said, my dad always had open house. Like, if there was any problems or struggles, he always invited family to live with us. We had a really big house. So I had more exposure to all these things during the times that they lived with us. And these are my mom's sisters, by the way.
Yeah.
So that's how I was raised. At a certain age, I was drawn to Jesus. And I like carried my own Bible. I don't remember when I got it, but I was young and I was given a Bible as a gift. And it was the one with red letters in it for Jesus speaking. And I used
Oh,
Jesus words all the time. and I was just really drawn to Jesus. And I was such an introvert. I didn't speak often. I was
Mm.
always in, I know, you know me well now that I
I
speak
know,
a lot.
I can imagine you not speaking. Oh, my goodness, Tiffany.
I know. When I run into people from when I was young, they're like, "You talk now." I was like, "I talk now." I was all in my head before. I was all a
Yeah,
daydreamer. I
yeah,
was that little girl that used to sit in a tree. My brothers actually created a little tree house for me because I could sit in the tree by myself and play with the ants and bugs. I played with bugs at that time. I made them little tree houses. I mean grass houses. I don't
yeah.
know if that was kind of that was a thing. Kids did that, I think.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I played with bugs and I was a loner. I didn't get along with I did not get along, but I just didn't have a lot of friends.
yeah.
And but I was like really attached to Jesus young. And
Mm,
when I had to go to CCD, which is catechism class for Catholicism, I read the Bible so much when I was young that I would dispute my the nuns that would teach us or the priests. And um I remember the first communion. And for first communion you have to confess your sins to the priest to be forgiven and then you can have your first communion. And that's the thing in Catholicism. And I remember sitting there and he was like, "So, what's your sin?" I was like, I don't have one."
mm.
And he was like, "No, you have a sin. Everyone has a sin." I was like, "Oh, but I talk to Jesus all the time, so I'm okay." And he was like, "You're not following the rules. You have to discuss your sin." He's like, "Do you fight with your brothers?" I was like, "Probably." He's like, "Okay, that's your sin." And then, but I didn't. And by the time I got in junior high, I used to ditch classes. I used to be like, I would go in and be like, "Why are we doing this?" And God says, "Isn't like this." Or I remember reading through the Bible like in most chapters, even in the Old Testament, God was like, "I don't like religion because it separates my people from me." And I didn't know young what that meant, but I did know that we had so many rituals that I felt that
Mm.
we were actually disobeying what God said. And so I didn't understand that. I kept going to the priest, like, we're not supposed to pray to statues. Like, God says that in the Bible. And so why are we doing this? And they always just brushed me off. So by high school, I kind of stopped going to church.
Mm.
Um, but we were raised in an area where everyone was Catholic, so I didn't know there was anything else
Mm.
till college. And then I went to Catholic college, went to Marymount, but my roommates um, coincidentally would just be like always like a pastor's child.
Oh,
So isn't that funny? So
pastor's
I
pet.
a pastor's child girl, yeah. So I had three roommates like through the years, and they were pastors' kids, and so I would go to
Oh,
church with them. And a Catholic sermon is like church is 45 minutes. When you go to like
mhm.
Baptist church, it can be long. I remember being like, when is this over?
It
You
could
know,
be all day. Yeah.
all day, and it's so different. And at this time,
Yeah.
like I knew the Bible. I grew up reading the Bible over and over. So I could go into church and be like, I just remember like multiple times they'd say one verse in the Bible and then have a whole sermon on it that will last forever. Now I
Mhm.
did like the food. I had a favorite. One of my roommates, Shelly, her dad was like pastor for some really big church in LA and they
Mhm.
barbecued afterwards. So I did like their food. Um, but he also was alcoholic and lived with his girlfriend. So I was kind of like, you
Oh,
know, yeah, exactly. And it's a huge church, so I'm not going to give the name, but
uh,
so that, so I started my journey of trying to find where I belong. Um, but meanwhile, while I was young, I remember my mom's family, my grandfather's brothers and stuff started dying because we're like Native American. They lived a long time. So they're in their hundreds. I remember going to a lot of funerals as a child and people crying and stuff. And I was like, why are they crying? They get to go home. That's a good thing. You know what I mean? I just was like, they get to go home. That's a good thing. Why are people crying? So I didn't understand why people cried in funerals because I just never felt like I belonged here.
Yeah.
And and then when my grandfather died, I was junior high. I was the junior high girls and dance, and I remember missing his funeral because of it. And my mom was a bit hurt by that, but they let me do it
Hmm.
because when you have a big concert, you've been practicing forever, so I can go to the funeral. But my grandfather started coming to me, I guess, in my dreams, and was so real, and would start giving me messages, and we would just talk, you know, and it was so common that he came to me that I didn't even remember that he was dead, honestly. Like there were times
Hmm.
and people would be like, "Oh, when Granddad," I was like, "When Granddad," like, "Oh, when Granddad died," I was like, "What?" And I was like, "Oh, that's right," you know. But I'm
Hmm.
still young and I don't understand any of this.
Hmm.
Um, so I don't know. Fast forward, college, I had something traumatic happen to me, and I went home, and I remember like I would just be out and about, and I was just in a probably unstable state and looking, for help and like God. And so I would be anywhere, and someone would stop me on the street and say something like, "God's got you," blah blah blah. And then other times, someone would be like, "Oh, I need to tell your future," or "I need to do this," and it was really, really common. And I would even get random phone calls like, "I need to talk to you, Tiffany." People I didn't know. Yeah, I know that's so. It was. I We didn't talk about this. Like
Yeah,
this, I
no.
rarely talk about. You know what I mean? And
Uh-huh.
um when I went back to college after that happened, I remember I was with a friend and
Hmm.
all this was kind of going on. And then I started going to psychics. And so I started opening myself up to that. But there is light and there is dark. And at this point, I don't really know. There is sources that come from the light and sources that come from the dark. So, but I was just open. I was just open. I was open heart. I was just open to anyone. And I'm getting all these messages, and people are telling me things everywhere I go. And I was with a friend, and this is, you know, before computers.
Hmm.
So we had to go to a copy place to get our reports copied to turn in, or like college reports. And when I walked up, the guy working there, we handed him our paperwork, and he went to the back and he came back out. He goes, "I need to pray for you. God just told me I need to pray for you." And I was like, "Okay, okay." And the girl I was with was like, "Okay, we're going to do this." Oh, another pastor's child, by the way.
Oh.
And so they sat there and prayed for me. And when we left, she told me her ex-boyfriend, um, she was someplace and someone told him, "I need to pray for you." She's like, but he didn't believe in God. And that summer he went to Hawaii and died in the surfing accident. So I was like, okay, pray for me. I'm good. Um, so we're gonna fast forward because I've had a lot of incidents like that. And this was because, but I will say, because spirituality, we can't forget that there is good light and dark light. And when you
Mhm.
dive into something like this, you have to remember that. You have to protect yourself. But since I feel like I was always kind of thrown into it, I didn't know how to protect myself. So when I eventually got married and had kids, all I all I knew was I'm not going to go that route because I want to protect my children.
Mhm.
Um, I will back up a minute. I was living with a roommate. I was finished with college, and I was again kind of, it always draws me in. I was again kind of drawn into psychics and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And I remember I used to, when I was coming home for a couple of days, there was this person walking in front of our apartment building. And I remember thinking, like, there's something strange about that person. I can't tell if it's male or female. I can't tell anything about it.
Mhm.
And, but I ignored it, came home, and one day we had a knock at the door, And I opened the door and it was this person. And he said to me, I want to be your friend. And I was just like, a feeling came over me and I was like, no. And I slammed the door shut. Okay. And then my roommate came home and was like, Tiffany, my mom gave me a weird message that someone in her church came to her and said, tell your daughter's roommate that God wants her back. And so I was like, all right, we're going to church. But I mean, we probably went a couple times, I don't know, but I didn't dive into spirituality for a while, for a long time, because that incident scared me.
Mhm.
So we're going to fast forward to me. Oh gosh, I have a lot of stories, so I'm trying to think. We're going to fast forward. Okay, and we'll have to like go back again to some other stories later. And I do plan on writing the book about it. But my kid's husband, when I met my kid's husband and I decided to have kids, I decided to shut the door on spirituality because
Oh,
I was like, I knew at this point, based on all my experience, that there's light and there's dark, and that there's a battle. And I felt like when walking through it unprotected and without knowing, that battle can be with you. You know what I mean? Because I definitely felt like I had good people in it, and then and I saw darkness. Um, and I didn't want it to affect my kids. It scared me.
mhm.
So I completely shut the door of spirituality, and we didn't join the church right away. We joined the church kind of when we were having marital problems. And I had met someone at the mall and they had like four kids. We only had two. And I approached them. They're like, how do you do this? Like me and my husband, we're on the brink of divorce.
Mhm.
Oh, okay. Let me back up a little bit. I always got visions. Even from a little girl, I would get visions. And the visions always come true. So
They always come true?
they
Really?
always come true. If I get a vision, it always comes true. And this is what confused me because
Wow.
when I got into church, because I was like, where's the free will? So I would ask pastors and priests and everyone be like, I get this vision because they're not always good visions. So you don't want them to come true. And
Mhm.
I would ask, like, I get these visions, like, why do I get these visions? And they always come true and they're not always good. Like, I don't want to know the information I'm getting sometimes. And I never really got an answer that I liked. So when I got the vision of my husband leaving me, and the vision isn't, it's kind of like I remember, and it's not like sleeping or anything. I could be awake and then all of a sudden it's just like, I guess like a video opens up
Mhm.
and I get a vision. And so I remember getting the vision of my husband. I mean, we didn't have a good marriage, but my husband leaving me, and I
Mhm.
knew what it meant. And so I went to, so I was like, I don't want to be a single mom. I have a minor degree in child psychology, and they were like, girls, I mean, children of single moms, especially boys, and all this negative stuff. So I
Mhm.
was like, I don't want to be a single mom. I'm scared to be a single mom. So I went I was looking for a way to fix our marriage. And so this couple was like, oh, we go to this church. So we went to this church. And when I met like the pastor's wife, I was like, I had this vision about my marriage. I think he's going to leave me. My visions normally come true between 6 months and a year, something like this.
Mhm.
And so she said to me, oh, it's probably God giving you like vision for the path you're on, but you can change it. So I was like, perfect. I'm going to do everything I can to change it. And I'm a businesswoman. So I did business plan for the marriage. We're going to do this, and that. We're going to go to retreats. We're going to do counseling, whatever.
Mhm.
Um, and I mean, it didn't obviously, you know me as a single mom. It didn't fix it.
Didn't fix
But
it.
that's what I would do. I would go to pastors and priests and be like, I get these visions. Sometimes they're good, but a lot of times, I think a lot of times he gave me visions that were not good,
Yeah.
and I didn't want them to happen. And I didn't understand free will. So I was
Mhm.
like, where's the free will? Like, if if God gives me a vision and it's gonna happen, where's our free will? So, um, so eventually I worked hard. I worked hard to save the marriage. We went to retreats. We went to marriage retreats. We had meetings and everything. And one day the kids were in preschool. I went to a Bible study. I got dived deep into church.
Mhm.
And I was at an evening Bible study. I was teaching at a preschool with the kids. I was teaching Sunday school.
Mhm.
Um, I was going to this organization called Titus Women, which was like, it's based on the theory that women need to be submissive in the marriage, in the Christian family,
Oh,
and did that for 2 years. And there's nothing wrong with submissive. It's just like the understanding of it. You know what I mean? It's not like you do whatever they say or whatever.
mhm.
So I understand that more now. And even in the spirituality side, I I get it better. But the way they taught it was just like you have to be submissive. And if there's a problem in your marriage, it's normally the wife's fault. So I was so obedient to this for like a whole year, like everything they said. And then still at the end of going into it the next year, I remember going to like one of the women, the elders, and was like, my marriage is falling apart. I need help. And, it's all about me. It's all about the women. They're like, you must not be loving enough. You must not be whatever.
Oh my
So
God.
that one night I was getting the kids were with me, and we were leaving. I was leaving the Bible study. They had a kids program. I
Mm,
grabbed them and I'm walking to the car, and I heard God say, let it go. And I was like, let what go? And they're like, he was just like, just let it go. And then I had understanding. I was like, oh, okay. I thought, because out of the Titus women studies, they say it's a mistake for women to tell her husband what to do. And I was the one that was like trying to save the marriage. So I got
mhm,
home, put the kids to bed. He was there on the sofa, and I was like, okay, Krishan, I am going to stop forcing you to go to counselors or whatever.
mhm,
And I'm going to leave it up to you. You can lead this. And he said, all right, well, I want to separate. He's like, I don't think we should be together. I think we can find other people, blah, blah. And I was like, you know what I mean? That was
mhm,
not the answer I thought I was going to get. I went to my room, I got on my knees, and I was like, what are you let happening right now? Because I thought the Bible said you don't like divorce, you hate divorce, and you fix some marriages. Why aren't you fixing mine? I was like, you are gonna have to provide for me and my kids now. And the next morning, I was a volunteer at the kids preschool. The
mhm,
next morning, on the way to the preschool, my friend called me and she was like, hey, Tiffany, do you want to? She's like, I know you quit real estate for your husband. She's like, but I have some people moving into town. Can you go into real estate just to help them find a place? And I was like, yes. So me and mind you, no one knows yet that my husband decided to leave me the night before. And
right.
then I walk into the preschool and I'm volunteering free so that my kids can go part-time.
Mhm,
And the director says, but I have credentials. And the director comes to me. She's like, there was an emergency last night. We need another full-time teacher. Would you be willing to do that?
wow.
And your kids can come here free. And I was like, yes. And I was like, okay, God, this is how you just decide to provide. This is happening,
Yeah.
you know. Um,
Yep.
that's a whole thing. I'm writing a whole book about that too.
Mm,
And and how he proved to me based on the difference between him saying or the Bible teachings or the way I learned in church that God hates divorce. So therefore you stay in a marriage, whatever, where
mm,
he was like, nope, I never approved this divorce, this marriage in the first place. I
oh,
don't bless or I don't approve or make things happen that is not my plan for you.
yeah.
So um there was a lot in the process of going through that divorce where he just showed up
Mm, mm,
miraculously,
mhm,
but what you would expect. Uh,
mhm,
so
That because here's I heard and that first of all you heard the voice that said let it go. You weren't
Yeah,
sure what it was in reference to, but I think it probably occurred to you later what that was in reference to. Let the marriage go, and then through different vehicles provided a way for you to exist, to at least survive, if not thrive, through the
right.
offer of a job at the daycare center and getting back into real estate, helping
Mm,
with. So, and it's just a matter of looking at the bigger picture, right? And
yeah,
seeing these, and sometimes it comes through. It did. All of those came through the relationships that you have, and sometimes through relationships you don't even know, you don't even have, but the message comes through that person to you, and
yeah,
you know that it's for you because
yeah,
they say that, but sometimes they don't, and it becomes evident after a while that it was meant for you. So then you know that you're okay. You know what path you're supposed to take.
yeah, yeah. That was like he answered immediately.
It
I
immediately. Yeah,
needed it immediately. Yes. So, and it wasn't obviously it wasn't expected,
yeah,
And
right.
then,
And like you said, nobody knew what was going on with your marriage. So
no.
all of this stuff started to happen. That's deep.
Yeah, yeah. I have a lot of stories where God just he carried me through
Mm-hmm.
the first couple of years for sure. There was a point when I was terrified. I was scared. I had all these ideas of, what was going to happen to my kids, and then I had indoctrinated myself into the Christian beliefs. I was kind of like, he
Oh,
hates divorce, and am I sinning,
yeah.
Um, and I
Because that's all you were exposed to. That's all you knew. Yeah.
Right, right. I was trying to be that perfect
Mm-hmm.
wife, that perfect Titus wife. And I remember going to them and being like, well, it looks like I'm getting separated. My wife wants to leave. And
Mm-hmm.
there was no empathy for me. None. It was just kind of like, well, this is on you. So I never went back. And I had things to say about that program afterwards.
Yeah.
But so it
Wow.
wasn't welcome anyway. Like a divorced woman wasn't welcome. And that's a problem in the church. I'm
Yeah.
not totally against the church um because we're still all men,
Mm-hmm.
mankind, and most of us are followers, right? And if you dive down the rabbit hole of spirituality, you're going to see how the Bible's made and this and that and all that. But I wasn't there yet. All I knew was and grateful for I already had a connection with Jesus and God on my own. So
Mm-hmm.
every time I was involved in a church, there was a part of me that didn't belong or that questioned. I've stayed open to questioning things. Um, and I remember when my girlfriends that were from my Bible studies, they all turned on me at this point. And when the Titus people were like, you know,
Yeah.
kind of turned on me too. And I was just like, I remember telling God, I was like, oh, here's your people, you know, like, look how they're treating me. This wasn't me. This wasn't my fault, that my husband already was cheating and wanted to leave. I like, you saw how hard I worked to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And I, at that time, was building a garden in my backyard.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard God say, get the Bible and meet me in the garden. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, okay. It's like 5 in the morning. Um, and I got the Bible. He's like, open it to Genesis. And I was like, oh, I don't need to read Genesis. I've been reading Genesis all my life. Because when I was a little girl and I read the Bible, I
Yeah.
always read Genesis,
Yeah.
read a little bit of the Old Testament, but all the wars and stuff bothered me. So then I skip to the New Testament and read Jesus' words, the red letters. And he's like, and I know this part sounds crazy, literally, because I heard him say this, and I go to the garden, I open up my Bible, and I felt like it was Jesus, and I would get an image, and it would be like light pixelations,
Mhm.
and I would get a lesson in Genesis, and and I was reading it, and there would be messages like, so long ago, and I forgot about the story, but I remember, oh shoot, when wasn't expecting to talk about this. This just went down this road, so I'm trying to remember what. But we're reading Genesis, and the moral, like the moral of this message was sin isn't what we do. Like God created us to be in relationship with Him, right? And and He didn't actually put any rules on it. So if you think about it, Adam and Eve got to be free as a bird and
Yeah,
have everything. They had abundance in Eden. He had zero rules for us.
yeah,
We were just supposed to be in relationship with him and love with him and enjoy this earth that he gave us.
yeah.
And when they, like were exposed to knowledge, oh, this here it was. The When they were exposed to the knowledge of good and evil, that's when sin was created, because that's when you make the choice of what you want to do. And that was never his intention. His intention wasn't even to give us that burden of that knowledge. It was
Mhm.
just to let us enjoy him and him enjoy us. And da, da, da. So as you see, like the Bible, it like right then and there, once Adam and Eve got that knowledge, they were like, ah, and then shame came into reality and they covered themselves. So imagine how like life was before all that happened.
Yeah.
I mean, they're naked, they're enjoying each other, they're enjoying the fruits of the earth, the fruits of
Right,
them, and you know
right.
what I mean? And then as soon as they got the knowledge of good and evil,
Mhm,
then shame came into play. And then sin came into play because then it's once you have the knowledge and
mhm,
then choose to
mhm,
go against a law, that's what sin is. It's that free will. It's that choice to go against the law.
mhm. So
So
I've got, so the question I want to ask you, and then I want to talk about the, I don't know, the experiences, I guess, that I've had. But let me ask you this. When you hear, um, when God speaks to you, when the higher power speaks to you, is it a voice that you hear, or is it just a knowing? Is it just that somehow information new to you is imparted to you in some way? Like it's like
yeah,
telepathic almost, voice
yeah,
voice you hear.
yeah. So God or the universe can do it however, whatever gets your attention. So in the beginning, it was an actual voice. And if it was going to wake me up, it was like, Tiffany. And I'd be like, what? I eventually had to tell him no more of that. I was like, no, no more of that. I'm here. Because it was scary.
Yeah. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
So
Yeah.
it's changed, and I think it's just because I'm a lot more open to it now.
Yeah.
But it's not like it wasn't like I understood what was happening from the beginning. Like
Yeah.
it's a process. So yes, it was strong voice in the beginning. I'm like, okay, don't do that anymore. I don't like that. It's
Yeah.
scary. Um, to a softer voice, and now it's turned into a little voice, a knowing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. And
So
when it was a softer voice, like out of the Tiffany, he's going to do what he needs to do to get your attention. So I didn't, and before I knew to listen and to trust to it, he would have to give me signs all day. So if he told me something, I would get signs all day to confirm what he told me. I still do that, actually. I still do that. Yeah.
wow, that's so great. So, I guess the spirituality came to me later than it came to you. It's like you seem to have been exposed to this connection that you have early in your life, and I've kind of come to it as an adult, and you were able to give us in the details of your journey, some time markers. And I don't
Hmm.
know if I have that. For me, time is, it just kind of blurs.
Yeah.
I mean, I can tell you, um, go back and tell you some things that I have experienced that kind of maybe led me to where I am now. So the death of my mother, I was 8 years old when she died. She was 41. We were, me and my two sisters, um, uh, were taken in by my uncle, my mother's brother, and with her death, that was the wake and the funeral and all of that. That was my first exposure to death,
Yeah.
and I thought it was insane to have a body laid out for people to come and gawk over. I'm 8, and I think I turned 8 in May. She died in July. And so I was like, why are we, so we were made to come and sit and be in the presence of this. I didn't touch the body, but I heard it was stiff and cold later. I heard that later, but it just didn't look like her. And I thought, this is insane. I said, because in my mind, in my 8-year-old mind, she wasn't even there. This was just a, a, a a shell of a shell of so that's sort of a, I don't know, the beginning of knowing that there's something beyond, I don't know,
Yeah.
beyond this body, right?
Yeah.
So and I swore to myself, and it's still part of my will, that I don't want a wake. I mean,
Hmm.
so you can celebrate my life if you want. That's fine. But I'm not there. I'm not even going to experience it. And why torture? Because I felt tortured having to sit there. Me and my two sisters. I'm 8. My sister, my middle sister is 6, and the baby sister was, I don't know, 18 months. She wasn't even 2 years old. I don't even know if she was there. But we had to sit there through that, and I thought, this is insane. So, and then later on, what was it that occurred to me later on about? Um, I guess it was the rituals of the Presbyterian Church. So the Presbyterians, you grew up largely Catholic, and Presbyterian would be like the tier below that, below Catholicism, I guess. Only in that, like it was as ritualistic as Catholic Church was,
Yeah.
and the rituals just seem like a check mark. Like, we have to do this, we check off, just all the rituals that you have in a service, and it just
Right.
didn't feel real to me. It didn't feel,
Didn't connect.
it didn't connect. it was
Yeah.
it was just this template that people followed. Somebody made it up, and they decided that they have to follow it in this way, and it just didn't feel like it was anything to do with my life, at all. And I went along with it, thinking, okay, so maybe as I get older, it'll hit me somehow. It never did. It never did. So, and you talk about the light and the dark. I've come to believe I've come to believe this, that there is the light and the dark, and that mainly, okay, there is a spirit, there is a being that is greater than ourselves,
Hmm.
that brings us to this earth to do its work. And I don't assign a gender to it. I just think it's a being. It's something that exists, and it brings us here for a purpose to do its work. And we have to find what that work is for each individual. We are
Right.
all very different, and we all come with different gifts and talents and skills, and we are supposed to use those skills. And in my way of interpreting my spirituality, if we don't use those skills, that is the sin. And those who are disconnected, there is only one in the
Mm,
universe. There's only one being, and it brings us to this earth as an emanation of it to do its work. And those who are disconnected from that being are become the dark side because they don't know whose they are. They don't know that they belong to the higher being and spirit and that they're here to do God's work. That's the dark. And then those of us who are in the light, who understand that we are emanations of God and that we're here to find our purpose, find out what our skills are, and to use those skills. And if we don't, it's a sin. And so, and you seem to be so plugged in. It's like the way it was explained to me, and the way I explain it is that it's like the electrical current in your house, how you plug in an appliance to get it to work. It's like we have to plug into the higher power
we do.
to do our work. And you seem so plugged in. Oh,
Yeah.
look at that baby.
Doggy wants part of this.
Hi. You want to get
Trying
into
to
the
get my
conversation?
attention.
So plugged in and so, connected that you're seeing visions and you're being talked to. And so I'm trying to get to that point. And I try to do it through meditation, through sitting still, with everything open, your arms you're not folded, your legs aren't crossed, and you're sitting and you're just kind of I try to concentrate on my breathing and just be still and get rid of the chatter that goes on in your mind so that you can hear that still small voice. If
Hmm.
it's and sometimes it's for me, it's not hearing a voice, it's a knowing. It's
Yeah.
like something puts an idea into my
Yeah.
head. And that
Yeah.
something, I attribute that something to be the higher power, the
Yeah.
the presence, the one.
Hmm.
And and I attribute that so that thought comes from there. And also the feelings that you have, like the instinctual things that happen. In the neighborhood that I live in, for a while, I was doing walking. I was walking in my neighborhood as a way of exercise. And I would do it on early Sunday morning, like between 6 and 7 in the morning, when nobody's out except for maybe people who are walking their dogs. And I figured I can do it alone and be, kind of in my own head. And all of the people who are disconnected from God aren't up yet. you know? So I wouldn't feel
Right.
threatened. And I never did because I feel like if you concentrate, if you focus on that negative stuff,
Hmm.
you attract it. And that's part of
Right.
what I learned from my
What you
spirituality.
focus on expands, what they say. Yeah.
It expands, yeah. So I go out, I go into places by myself, and I don't think about any threat or harm coming to me. So I'm going doing my walk. And on this particular morning, there is a older couple who's also out walking, and they're walking a little bit ahead of me. But then I see this van. It's not a van. It's a SUV. I guess is that what they are? Uh, Cars that
Uh-huh.
comes going in the opposite direction of me down the street. But the driver, kind of does this and kind of looks over at those of us who were walking in the opposite direction. And I kind of noted it, but I didn't think anything more about it. Then we turn the corner and we go east on a in a on another street. Then this van or this SUV now turns around and it's on the street. This couple takes a turn and goes in a different direction from the direction that I go in, and I continue down the street. Now this SUV is, you know, was going down the street where we were all going. Then he turns around and he parks. And he parks on the same side of the street that I'm walking on. And something said to me, don't pass, don't you pass that truck. Don't you pass that van. Don't walk past that van. I said, oh, okay. So I didn't. I turned down another street. And don't you know that that SUV followed me down that street? And I said,
Yeah.
early Sunday morning. Why in the world would anyway? So in these streets, it's a very residential. Like I say, nobody's out except for those who are walking their dogs. I think there might have been when I did turn down the street. It was a street that I saw somebody out watering their lawn.
Hmm.
So now you know there's something is telling me don't pass that truck. Um, so now I'm thinking, you know, I'm everything's alarmed. I'm on alert. And
Right.
now I'm thinking I need to get to a place where there's more eyes on the street. And
Hmm.
I saw this guy watering his lawn. I went down that street and then I cut over again. And but this SUV is following me. And I eventually make it out to the main thoroughfare where there's a lot of traffic. Even though it's early Sunday morning, there's still a lot of traffic. And but that's where I was headed because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't, you know, sort of isolated and
Yeah.
do something crazy. And so I did that, and I finally made my way back to my house, but I didn't let him see because you know he was still
You
trying
know,
to follow me, and I
yeah.
thought, oh God. But anyway, the point was that, but a voice said to me, or it wasn't even a voice, it was just a thought entered my head. Don't pass that van. I said, okay, okay. But yeah, anyway, being being more connected is what I'm trying to get to where probably won't ever get to the level that you are because you seem to just, you know, it just kind of comes to you. But I do want to be able to just, you know, have that regular communication and not just, you know, these sporadic like thoughts entering my head or, uh, and I have gotten messages from people, you know, people telling
Hmm.
like you said, confirming whatever path that you're on, or you know, telling you that maybe this is not the right way to go. So I've
Right.
gotten that, but I do want to get more connected, more
Yeah.
did.
So I think that, first of all, I know that you're connected because, when you were consulting me on my nonprofit, and that's why I became comfortable talking to you, that you would say things and it would be confirmation or you just feel it. Okay. So what I think, what I believe that when spirit is talking through you
Mhm,
and it's truth and it's like it's truth, it's wisdom from source,
mhm.
that it hits you a certain way.
Ah,
And I think no matter like who's around, it'll hit you. It will, because I think we're all connected and we're all given truth and wisdom. It's just that there's so much noise and we're trying to figure things out without source. You know what I mean? And when someone gives you words that is from source and it's truth, it
mhm,
hits you like, oh yeah, that's real. Because I remember being in Bible studies and small groups and people discussing the Bible, and I would I would get this feeling and I would like start shaking and be like, oh my gosh. And then I would just answer the problem. And it would and I was still kind of shy then. So and then I would answer the problem, but it would come out with like I was holding it in, I would come out with shake. And then people would be like, oh. And then I remember being like, oh. that didn't come from me. You know what I mean? I was like, oh, I'm so smart. I was like, that didn't come from me, but they would explain things, you know.
Mhm.
Um, so and that can happen like in everything in a regular conversation. I'm sure you've had it where you're just like you've said this to me. You know what? This just came to me. Why don't you try this or this or that?
Yeah,
And when you say this just came to you, well, where'd it come from?
where'd it come from? Right,
Yeah, exactly. Like you didn't think of it, you didn't read it in the book and remember it. It
right.
literally is an inspired thought, and inspired thoughts come from,
Yes, it comes from
yeah,
source. It comes from,
yeah.
yes. And we were having a conversation recently about the distinction between higher source, then a higher power, whatever, the presence, God,
Hmm.
and your ego and you.
Ego.
So
Yeah.
how do you make that? Is there a way to determine to make that distinction? Like, are
Well,
you
one way, I think one way and one big way is that the idea you're coming up with or whatever's coming out of you, is it coming from a fear base? And we live in the fear base. You know, is it lack base or is it fear base or is it inspiration? Now, even inspiration can be fearful, but is the fear based on like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. That seems too big for me to do. I have no idea how that can happen. Or is the fear coming from, I need to do this because I'm going to starve if I don't, or I need to do this because blah, 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 you know? And so I need to do this because I need to be better than this, or I need to not be lazy, or I don't want to starve. So that's ego.
that's ego?
Ego is fear based. Ego will put you down. Ego is kind of like, I need to help you survive. It's not, I mean, it wasn't meant to be mean. I mean, bad. It's just like it's not connected. It's 3D. It's I need to help you survive. Whereas like when you're connected to source, source is like like how I started my nonprofit. Hey, you're gonna go to Haiti this summer. And I was like, hey, I'm gonna go to Haiti this summer to my friends. And I'm like, and then ego kicks in and is like, how do you think you're gonna do that? You're a single mom. How are you going to provide? You know?
But then it's a matter of listing, because in the same way that source decided that you needed to leave your marriage and then started to give you um, resources that was going to support you, right,
Hmm.
with the job, then that's how the question of how will come from source is the point.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
just tap into the fact that, okay, we're going to Haiti, and how that happens isn't your concern. It's like
Right.
source will make it happen for you. Like all these things that you're going to need to make
Hmm.
that happen will then present themselves to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, and I'm still learning. I mean, honestly, I'm still learning. When I decided to, probably like 3 years ago, when I really decided to dive deeper into my spirituality,
Mhm.
and that's, I mean, every day is a decision, Gwen. Like that was through that journey started 3 years ago, but I still would say I decided to dive deeper, and or it's more like I decided to accept
Ah,
my spirituality. I decided to bring back because I really did cut off a lot. I cut off my connection a lot. And I do feel that even though I had miraculous things happen to me while raising my kids, while relying on Christ, I at a certain point remember feeling like I feel less connected. I
oh,
remember feeling like I'm following rules now,
mm,
and you do get rewarded for following rules, but I felt less connected.
mm.
And also no one could explain my it was the one thing, no one could explain my visions. Like, why do I get these visions? And so when my children were young and I believed at this point, like, oh, if you do tarot cards, or if you do this and that, or if you're getting these visions, that could be from the devil, because that's what they kind of pushed. But when my kids were young still, and they were waking up with messages and visions, I was like, whoa, wait, my kids are doing this. I've raised them in the church. They know nothing else. This
Right,
cannot be bad,
right, right.
So
Mm-hmm.
they were young when I started beginning to have that turning point. I didn't walk away from the church at that point, because um, the church was still, God was still using the church to provide for me and my kids.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and also in that season during the early divorce, when I was meeting Jesus in the garden, and I was like, uh, "Your people, look at how they treated me," and he's like, "Calm down, Tiff. Um, and he's like, calm down, Tiff. Let's get your Bible. Let's go to the garden." He's
Yeah,
like, "At least you're here." So it was
right.
kind of like, this was just part of the path, is, what I mean? He said, "This is the path to what you needed at this time to
Yeah,
help me learn the Bible more and learn certain things." Um, and it gave me grace for people. You know what I mean? So it's like, the grace is there. God has, Jesus has the grace. Grace is the God. The universe has the grace. Everyone has a path. And that's why
yeah,
we can't really be judgmental, because
yeah.
everyone has a path and everyone has a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know someone else's path or purpose. We
Right,
don't even know our own. So that's the problem,
right.
We listen to too much. We listen to ego. Here's the problem. We don't only listen to our own ego, we listen to our neighbor's ego. We listen to our parents' ego. We listen to our mate's ego. And none of those egos are attached to source.
That's right.
That's where our confusion is.
That's right. Yes. Oh my gosh. So I hope those of you who are listening to this are getting something and can even relate to, or does this sound familiar to you? Are you, um, are you resonating with any of what you're hearing? And if you are, I hope so. I mean, you can, I don't know, make a comment in the comment section about this, because we want to continue this conversation. I there's so many paths I want to go down to talk about this. I have I've had some theories about like the whole phenomena of deja vu.
Me too.
Yeah, see,
Yeah.
wants to talk about.
We'll have to talk about that another time. Yeah.
Yeah, we really, let me get that, make sure I write that down. Um, yeah, so deja vu, and there was something else that occurred to me that now I've lost it. But oh, just the fact that I think that there are, um, I guess it's a matter of being of evolving to a point uh, where you are the most connected, I guess, to the
Yeah.
God, to God, or to the higher power, the presence, or whatever, the one, the source, and that we are all, and there's a spectrum, right,
Hmm.
or levels of where we are. Everybody's at a different point. We're still learning this, and we're still kind of evolving. So, and there's no, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the higher level is, but well,
I know there's so many theories on it. Well, I guess the highest level, you brought up religious science, and
yeah,
now I am going to I guess it started off as religious science or mind science, and now they call it um Center for Spiritual Living.
so, oh, so,
And but it's the same. And I mean, there's so many things. I also study Kabbalah, and that's the same, and Buddhism. So it all relates, and that's why
it
I
all
love
comes to source,
Center for
yeah.
Spiritual Living, because it all relates. But
Hmm.
I think the highest level would be how Jesus was, where he was directly connected. I
Yeah,
think what
yeah.
teaching recently I heard, oh, Marianne Williamson,
Oh, the
this
Course in
the
Miracles.
Course of Miracles. Yeah, I'm studying that now. So
Hmm.
in that she says, or whoever wrote it, Jesus is supposed to be channeling that, by the way. It says,
Mhm,
Jesus says, and he does say, what I do, you can do an even greater.
mhm.
What the Course says is that everyone has what I have, but I just don't have the rest. So it's kind of like we have the ability to do all that. We have the ability to connect like that, but we have so many layers of ego and other stuff that prevents us from
Oh,
doing it. Jesus didn't have all that. He just had the connection.
yeah, yeah.
So
There,
that's the ultimate goal.
that's the ultimate goal. Okay. So maybe this is a good place to end this
Yeah.
conversation and get us ready for the next one. And so
Yes.
we hope that you'll join us. I hope that we hope that you found this inspirational in some way and that
Hmm.
you'll join us for our next conversation.
Yes.
Till then, I'm Gwen,
And I'm Tiffany Lee.
and we'll see you next time.
Next time. Thank you.